So, this lecture is about human sexuality and the question what it is and what it can do good and what harm it can be done by human sexuality. So the question is, what is human sexuality? Human sexuality is the fact that there are two sexes we normally call male and female. And these two sexes have the duty, the function, the job to create new life. So in a way, maybe sexuality is a life force, or it serves the life forces that exist in their way as a male sexuality, the same as female sexuality. And sexuality in this perspective is beyond consciousness. It's beyond a conscious I, a conscious will, feelings, emotions. It's just there. It serves life as it is. And it serves that life goes on in this way. There are different ways of that life goes on. It's not necessarily sexuality. It's necessary that life goes on. There are different ways that life goes on, is passed from one organism to the next. But as humans, we are sexual beings. And because of that, this being a sexual is embedded from the very beginning in our organism. It belongs to us, belongs to our body, and belongs to our whole existence. And it is already made clear who we are, even if we are a female or male, after 10 weeks after conception. So it seems to be so important for us humans that this is made clear very early, if you are female or male, that this starts very early. And it starts by making a female organism towards a male organism. If there is no influence by hormones, every organism would from the beginning would develop further towards a female. Only under the influence of hormones, and the hormones are steered by the Y chromosome, we know it well, then it happens that a female organism is changed towards a male organism. This is one of the reasons why it takes longer to create males. It's easier to be female on the level of the development, at the level of the organism, than to become a male organism. You have to deconstruct the female and to make out of the female body organism to make a male organism that serves the purposes of the male sexuality. And this, maybe to ideology. Normally, for example, in the Bible it stands that the female is made out of the male. But now we know the opposite is true. Yeah. The male is made out of the female original female organism. No? Eva is not made out of Adam. It seems the opposite seems true. Yeah, and this organism starts very early to be sexual, but it needs time. It needs time that it's ripe enough to create new life, to have, to do the job, to create new life. So it depends also from the state of nutrition. The better the nutrition is in a society, in a population, the earlier the females are ready to receive babies and to give birth to babies. So sometimes this is already with 9 years, a female organism can be ready to get pregnant and to become a mother. that age difference in ripening between the female and the male is about 1 up to 2 years. The male becomes later capable to have the sperm available for procreating and becoming the father. And there is also you can say a period of very high activity in sexuality that is done by hormones, that is done by the way our brain reacts to the outside world, to cues, to sexual cues. If you see as a young person, you see sexual cues in the other sex, you get excited, your hormones are stir up, and then you have a sexual desire, and you want to have sex in a way. So, and this is a period of our life that is maybe the maximum is between 20 and 40 years, because this is the maximum where the females can have many children, and also the male to have most sperms available to become fathers. And that means it also lowers with the age, it lowers also with capacity to become mother or father. Yeah, and this on a psychological level, it can be connected with yes or no. It's in itself, sexuality doesn't need the yes form for having children. It's just if you don't want to have children, you have to prevent it. But sexuality in itself, if it is acting out, it produces children. So, sexuality then is something we have to deal with our psyche. It's something, a life force inside us. It's something that serves the life forces, and then we have to deal with it. We have to deal with it psychologically. Yeah? Because if you don't do it, then you procreate in a way maybe that is also not very helpful for you or for the children or for this community you live in. You see, for example, we have this situation now with many refugees from war zones in countries where there is war. And during the way going to other countries, they are raped, they come here, they have partners, and they become pregnant. In a situation where you could say it's absolutely a burden for the women, it's absolutely a burden for partnerships, it's absolutely a burden afterwards for the children to live under such condition, but it happens. But it happens. As long as it is not prevented, it happens. So this is, you see how huge this life force is. Even if we can say that the human sexuality and the human life force is in compare to other animals or plants we see around us, is already reduced. It's not so high as in other species you can serve. You look at cats or rats, no, it's much more. Yeah? And it also seems that the rate of birth is reduced by single birth. Yeah? There is no, like in other animals, we have 6, 7, 8 offsprings in one pregnancy. Normally in our human beings, we have only one. And there is the exception from the rule if there are 2 or 3. Yeah, so on a psychological level, we notice our sexuality as a drive, an urge, a desire. And something, in a way, you can't, somehow you can't avoid to be part of it. Yeah, it happens. It happens in the organism. It happens by the hormones, and even if you don't want, it happens. Yeah. And then the question is, how much can you deal with it? How much you can, in a way, get control over it? How much you can be the person that is applying sexuality instead of being applied by sexuality. Being used by sexuality rather than using sexuality for your purposes. And as this is such a necessary life force, nature, in a way, has designed it to be connected with emotions, a lot of emotions, and first-hand positive emotions. That sexuality is something you desire, that you feel pleasurable, that there's lust, there is joy, there is proudness, there is many emotions and sensations that you want to have. On the other side, we also know that sexuality is combined with a lot of awful feelings, very awful feelings. Pain, shame, disgust, feeling guilty. Yeah? And so this sexual issue is something that us as human beings, it challenges us very much. It's a big challenge. Sexuality is a big challenge for every human being to deal with it. On the practical level, and the same on the emotional level. Because it's so strong, it's connected with such strong feelings, positive feelings, and also negative feelings. One thing I forgot beforehand. These two sexes, male and female, yeah? It seems that nature, or the evolution, however you can call it, tries to put it to its extreme, to make the difference between male and female as much extreme as possible. Not only small differences, and to try out how big can the difference be that instead of the difference, they still work together. They still to the purpose to create new life, that the purpose is not is threatened. But you see it in the size of the egg. The egg is very, very big in compare to the sperm. The sperm is very, very little. And there are thousands, millions of sperms in compare with 300 eggs that from the beginning are in the body, in the ovaries of the females. And this is how we can see the big difference. And this difference with the testicle and the ovary, it is also then reproduced in the way how male and females think, feel, behave. So it's in a way to say how can you to maximize the difference between male and female before they completely are unable to come together. This is how I think the evolution is going on. And this is the reason why we are so different. The reason we are so different as male and female, because of this, because of sexuality, of course, the purpose of sexuality. Yeah, and this sexual behavior, the sexuality is also then acted out, is done by different ways. What we have then seen in our behavior. The behavior competing, being competitive, trying to be the better sexual partner for one than another person. We compete. Sexuality forces us to compete. Sexuality is forcing us to attract, flirting, to attract another person. Sexuality is, then is the act of copulation. Sexuality is also, because it's such a urge, it produces self-satisfaction, masturbation. And then sexuality is also being pregnant, giving birth, and breastfeeding. That is part of sexuality. It's a part of the female sexuality. As male, we do not experience that. Yeah, and then there's also some feeling in that, included in sexuality, shame. Shame that in a way protects you, that protects you from others, that they look at you, touch you, that with the shame you protect yourself and you can create intimacy. Shame is necessary to create a safe spot, a safe space for intimacy. And in a way, of course, it then could also prevent sexual contact. If the shame is too big, then you avoid every sexual contact. Yeah? Then it's more than just protecting you. It's an obstacle against sexual contacts. Yeah, and this sexual shame also can be something that could be imposed on others. As you told us today, yeah, from outside, that because sexuality is so much in itself combined with shame, the feeling of shame and the trying to protect you and try to, not to be inappropriate touched, then it also can be used to put shame on you and more shame on you and make you by this maybe deeply unhappy also. Yeah, the human sexuality is very different as male and female sexuality. It's very different because the sexual act in itself for a male is very short. But the consequences of the sexual act, if the female becomes pregnant, is huge. It's huge. Could be a lifelong thing for a female if she, after 1 second or minute of sexual intercourse, then she becomes a mother, has children, and has to deal with the children, has to care for the children. It's so much difference between what the female serves in this sphere than the male is serving. The male can have, in extreme, hundreds of children. There was news about a woman in Uganda. She was 39 years old and she had 38 children. So it's an exception. Yeah? Normally, maybe a woman, if this is not prevented to have children, they have more or less 10, 15 children. But then maybe it's a limit. And so our sexuality is something that we need to deal on a psychological level, and also is something that we need to deal on a social level and on a cultural level. Yeah? Because we live in groups, we live in bigger unities, we live in social unities, and so of course it affects the whole community how we deal with our sexuality. How early, for example, females get pregnant, have children, how many wives one man may have, and so on and so on. Yeah? And this is right. And if you look at culture, you look at the different communities that are now in the world and have been, everything is tried out. Nearly everything we culturally try out to deal with sexuality. So nowadays we call this gender behavior. How we behave as male and female, yeah? And what is appropriate or seems appropriate, what is allowed, what is not allowed, what could be done, yeah? Including also the question of homosexuality. Is it okay or is it not okay? Is it punished in a society or not? And so it's no wonder that all institutions of the society in one or other way try to influence our behavior and the way how we think about sexuality and how we deal with sexuality. First-hand, religions. Every religion has an idea how to deal with sexuality, what is appropriate and what's not. Yeah. And same political interests that are combined with this issue. Even financial interest may be interconnected with the thing of how many children a couple has, or is it possible to have children without being in a marriage? Yeah? Is it allowed to have this? Everything is, in a way, for society is a problem to be solved. On a very personal level, you can say that the sexuality, your sexuality, in a way determines your attractiveness to others. We see this in the way the public relations are done. Yeah? And every product that has to be sold is combined with sexual attributes to sell it better. Yeah, and we also, as human beings, do or try to combine sexuality and correlate sexuality with love. In itself, it's not correlated. In itself, it's something different. It's in itself is an extra. It's an extra of the human organism. Something extra. As love is something extra. But in different cultures, we try to interconnect love and sexuality maybe as much as possible. But there are always subcultures that they say no connection. There's no connection between love and sexuality. Let's act out sex, and there's no love involved. Or like the youngsters, what I hear nowadays, they say friendship plus. It's not a partnership, where normally you think partnership is combined with sexuality. They said it's friendship plus sexuality, but not partnership. Yeah. And maybe the main cultural idea is having sexuality is partnership, is when there is partnership. And if there is no partnership, there should not be sexuality. So we see it in our cultures, in many Western cultures, we see, and we maybe also try to force it towards this, that sexuality should be a basic element for long-lasting partnerships and marriage. But this is also something that could be put under question. Because when you are attracted to another person and have sexual desire to the other person, and you then go into a longer-lasting partnership, and you marry, and then there's the first child there, this has an immense influence on sexuality. Because now the female normally is less interested in sexuality, because now she has to engage with a baby, because now a lot of energy is absorbed by the baby, and then very often the man loses his wife to the baby. And now the baby is more important than the man, the husband. And then in this situation, sometimes in our culture, couples think, oh, let's have a second baby to save our marriage. And this, of course, makes this thing even worse. And produces more conflicts on this level of sexuality in partnerships. So then it happens in many longer-lasting relations, in marriages, sexuality is dead. It doesn't exist at all. And only exists in fantasy, so it only exists then maybe if somebody has an affair outside of the marriage, or maybe goes to the prostitutes and have some sexual pleasure there, if it's possible to have pleasure with a sexual prostitute, I don't know. Yeah. What I've written here is that, of course, that is, if we have these two sexes, male and female, there are also, in some individuals, there are incomplete defeminization of the body, and then you have two ovaries and testicle at once. We call it Hermaphrodismus in German, so it can also happen. And then it's the question, is it accepted? It is accepted by the parents, is it accepted by the society to leave it like this? Or it is the idea that you have to be one or the other? And then very often it could happen that the child is operated to be female or male, and this is a huge trauma, of course, for the child, if this is done so early without this person, this human being, not being able to make a proper decision how she or he wants to live further. Our sexuality is a cultural thing also, and it can stay very primitive. If it's not looked upon, if it's not reflected, if nobody is there that can give you proper ideas of what sexuality is, you grow up, around you you have many, many confused persons that do not know what sexuality is, that have their own problem with sexuality, and then you grow up in such an environment, and then this sexuality stays raw, undeveloped, primitive. And and if also there are ideologies, religious ideologies, then it can be, sexuality in itself can become more a burden than something that is life-forcing, life-serving. Yeah. So maybe also today, with the internet and all this available pornography on many levels, the young people are very insecure. Every youngster is insecure about what is sexuality. And they would need adults that are clear about sexuality, or at least as much clear as possible, to tell them what sexuality is, what it serves for, and what is good for, and what is not good for. And so, very early, our human sexuality can be traumatized by ignorance, by blindness, by not knowing, and of course by violence. But it was very often the consequence of this ignorance and not knowing. And so it also can be used not only as this positive life force, but it can be used to destroy another person. Yeah? Sexuality can be used to destroy the life of another person, the body, the psyche, and the social relations of another person. And where there is no clearness in a society, there are a lot of ideologies, there are a lot of attribution towards sexuality, how it should be, how you should be as a man, a proper woman has to do something, a lot of things, or elderly people what they should do or it's not allowed to do. And so we have a lot of, also idealization. Yeah? The ideal, wow, what sexuality could be and should be, and maybe as in a way you also can have this idea that sexuality is the most important thing in the world. But it is not. It's a very important thing, but it's not the most important of all. Or what I have written here, right here, Holy Virgin, yeah, not to have sex as the most important thing for a human being, yeah, it's something that also happens in us as human beings. Yeah, and then the question is how you can learn. How do you learn to be a female, be a male, to be a man, to be a woman, to be a mother, to be a father? Normally, it's the same as in many other things. Children look at the adults. They look at them. How do they behave? They copy what they see. They imitate what they see. And so it's so necessary that you, as a child, have proper role models that can show you how to develop, how to grow up with your sexuality. So in a way, when I try to define what healthy human sexuality could be and a healthy sexual identity could be, so I would say it's necessary to have an eye available for this. It's necessary to have a free will available for this. It's necessary to have contact with the body, to be in your body, to stay in your body. It's also necessary to be in contact with your feelings when it comes to sexuality. It's also necessary to be in contact with your own ideas about it, your fantasies about it, how you conceptualize sexuality for you. Have your own practices that fit to you, that you find appropriate for you. And and do it in your relations. And the question is, for example, is it a relation if you go to a prostitute? Has it to do with relation? Or has it to do with making another person an object for satisfaction? And using this person for simple as an object. Yeah, same can also be true. It's not so often, but it also can be true that what we have it nowadays, that women go to Africa or Caribbean states and looking for some lover boys there and treating them as well as object, paying the money, and that's it. Yeah. That's, in my view, not healthy sexuality. Okay, so far we can make a cut here for questions. So, because the next step is trauma of sexuality. First hand, I wanted to say something general about human sexuality. Yeah, Matthias.
Do you think the human species is monogamous?
No, not in itself. You see it. We have seriously. How do you say? Serial monogamy. Yeah, nowadays. Yeah, one partner and divorce the next partner.
No, that's not what I mean. At the same time.
Yeah. You see how it is acting out. This polygamy is acted out. Is a serious monogamy. Yeah. Now. Most of, but there's also, you see in practice, you see that men having more women at one time, or women having more than one lover in one time. It is in itself, it is not fixed to that. It depends. It depends from the culture, depends from your role models, it depends from, also from your traumatization or not. Yeah. The amount of trauma that is in sexuality maybe also can have an influence if you prefer monogamy or prefer polygamy. I wouldn't say that human sexuality in itself is designed to be monogamous. No.
The second question I have is, there's a high rate of separation. You said something after the second child in a partnership.
Yeah.
What do you think is the reason for?
Yeah, because the sexuality becomes difficult with two children. If they are young, have enough space, great enough space for intimacy and having also the interest. And what's also it's obvious. You can find a person very sexually attractive, yeah, and after the first sexual intercourse, you say, it's done. The attraction is lost. And so also being in a longer lasting relationship, the sexual attractiveness may decrease from year to year. And you find others more attractive, even if maybe it's in a way they're the same, but you find them more attractive. So in itself, this life force of sexuality serves the life force. It serves, the purpose is to create children. As much as, in a way, as much as possible on a biological level.
And do you think, I heard that women, once they have children, they have less desire for sexuality?
Say it again. If
women who had children, they have a less desire for sexuality.
Women that have already children.
Yes.
Yeah, you can see it. You can see it that some.
Opposed to men, it's different.
You can see it that sometimes women say, when I had my two children already, I was done with sexuality. I didn't have any interest in sexuality any longer. It happens. And it's, of course, because it's so different. The purpose of the female sexuality in dealing with the child and having the child and caring for the child is so different than what the male have to do with that. Okay, thank you for your question.
Yeah, please.
It said sexual shame creates intimacy. I just wonder about that word, intimacy. Can you say something like that? Sexual shame creates intimacy.
Yeah, because of feeling ashamed and that you do not want to be looked at naked, for example, that you create something to prevent that, and have clothes on, or if you don't.
Yourself, but intimacy is something good for me. So it's not what the meaning of intimacy.
Yeah, intimacy is something that protects you, and if you have sexual contact with another person, you want to have also a protected room. For example, the children, the parents with children, they don't want the children to look at them when they have sex. They want to create an intimate space where the children are not the witness of their sexuality. Okay. Mm-hmm. I expected more questions.
Did that mean you say when men go to a prostitute is healthy, when women go to gigolos it's not so healthy?
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
Could I hear that again?
Pardon?
Could I hear that again?
No, I didn't say. I said healthy sexuality, in my view, is combined with relation. Yeah, that you have real relations with it. And if it's just making the other person an object, I buy you like a good, yeah, and then you serve my purpose. The more I buy, the more I pay you, the more you have to serve. This is nothing to do with relation, human relation. It's just an objectifying of another person. And this is the same for female and males. Yeah.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Some children say, I'm born in the wrong body. My gender is like I'm a boy, but I'm a girl. Vice versa. And for some it's not that clear that when they're older they want they want more to be the opposite sex or whatever. And I know that for some children, and of course their parents, this is very difficult, it's a very hard time. And in Norway, these days, the children are younger and younger when they start with hormone therapy and all this. And I just wondered if you could say something about it.
There was I did a lecture some month ago here in Germany, and after the lecture, a man came to me and he said, "Oh, I'm so happy that I was here in the lecture, because I'm thinking about making an operation to become female. And now, after your lecture, I think about it, if it's really the right solution to make an operation." And I say, yes, you're right. Look at it, where it might come from, how it came that you're now in this conflict between feeling the body or your sex as inappropriate, and do a conciliation, make a work about it. Yeah, and surely he will find some reasons for that. There's always a reason for that. Yeah, and the medical solution isn't a solution. So you can see it from many cases that after the operation, they maybe for a while they seem to know I've got what I wanted, but there's underlying problems are not solved. And you are then traumatized. It's a traumatization of the body. If you make this operation with the body, it's so huge operations, and of course it traumatizes the body. In minimum, you had to make a therapy for dealing with the traumatization of the operations, but no, it's done. It's not aware. So in a way, I would say I don't have so much experience. I would say there's trauma behind, and it's better to look at the trauma behind than to make a medical operation.
So gender identification is not necessarily connected with sexuality. When you're talking about these people that want to have an operation, can we look at it separately? Gender identification from the system, not necessarily connected with sexuality.
No, there's the sexuality that is expressed in your body. This is one thing, yeah. How you are, how this organism is, how this organism is designed. And the other thing is the psychological level, how you deal with it. And this, everyone has to deal. Everyone has this, in a way, this two reference points. In the one side, my body, on the other side, my psyche. And I have, when it comes to sexuality, you have to see how it comes together. It also can be you're a female and you don't like to be a female. For whatever reasons. Yeah? Or you're a man and you would rather like to be, I would like to stay at home, have kids and cooking and washing and beautiful this could be. And then now I have to go to the oil industry and dig some dirty oil out of the soil. I don't want it. It can also be. Yeah? It depends from the ideas and role models you have and around you. Gender has to do with role models, also with role models. That you say, oh no, I don't want to be like my mother. I see how awful it was for my mother. She was all their life unhappy and I don't want to repeat it. I want to become an engineer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see that.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you've facilitated any work around, say, a mother not wanting a boy, that then the boy becomes heterosexual. Have you seen any of that?
That the boy
becomes
homosexual.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is. Although there's not even one person that is homosexual came to me and said, "Oh, let's have a look. Why?" They don't know. Until now, not. Until now, not. Yeah. So it's just difficult to say something about that. But very often you see that there's, a difficult mother-son relationship in the background of. But it's also in the background of heterosexuality very often. So it's difficult for me to say this so clear. And I would really need more people, or at least some people, coming and asking the question in an intention, why I'm homosexual.
Good title for a new workshop.
Huh?
Good title for a new workshop.
Could be, yeah. To find out more about this. Otherwise, it's really speculative. Yeah? And I really hesitate to say something in my theory without having the experience of many constellations. Let's maybe go on.
I'm interested in the idea of when sex is determined in the fetus. Because what I've always understood is in the male, the sperm, the 23rd chromosome is either X or Y. If it's Y, you get a male. And there's no way of undoing that. So on the physical level of the body, that's always going to be a male.
Yeah, the physical body, even if it's there's something that are genetic problems, there's XX, Y, or 0, though maybe this creates some extra prototypes of human beings. But normally, it is designed very early. It's very early, female, male. Male made out of female. So Matthias?
I just want to go back to that question I had before about monogamy and polygamy. So, do you think if a person relates to another person, to a man, to a woman, and goes in a deep emotional relationship with that person, that, and with sexuality and everything, that you can live let's say 2 or 3 relationships with that, like that. If there's a deep emotional relationship. Mm-hmm. Sexuality is clear. You can, if you don't get attached emotionally. If you stay more maybe on the superficial level, it can be for someone easy to do a little bit here, a little bit there. But if you think if you really, get into an emotional relationship, you can live that with many partners.
Mm-hmm.
Because my observation is these people who do that, I question, do they really connect and relate emotionally deeply?
Mm-hmm.
So that's my doubt.
Yeah. I think what you are now touching is a relationship and deep relationship and exclusive relationship, and that has to do with the mother-child relationship. Because it all starts, every relationship starts with an exclusive mother relationship. And this model of relationship, of exclusiveness and being extra and deep, connected with deep emotion, then we transfer to intimate relationships. And this is the reason why many people have difficulties then to say, I have the same deep emotions and relations to this person as to that person, because this is the mother and not that. So this love issue that is in the child-mother relationship is then transferred in the relationship, intimate relationships. And if you do not deal with that, you see it beyond that, you do not relate to that, then you can have different relations, but they don't have the quality of this original mother-child relationship.
Does not.
No, they don't have. And the more you still, maybe you could also say, the more to deal with the mother-child relationship, the more exclusively you have to expect that your partner gives you what your mother didn't give you, couldn't give you. This is, I think, one of the consequences why this monogamy relationship with one person is so widespread.
No, I'm just thinking of if men take more care of small children, can they also affect their sexuality, that they aren't so interested in sex? Because you said
we know in this there are some studies about falling in love. Yeah, and falling in love means you're in a high state of hormones that are needed for sexuality. The longer you together, the more androgens the females become, and the more estrogens the male become. So it goes on an equal level. And when the children are involved, it even more goes on the hormone level, goes more to equality. And then caring for the children and caring for is more important, even for men, than sexuality. Nature has its tricks. Nature has some tricks to make something possible that otherwise wouldn't be possible. See?
It does seem very complex for a mother, because she has one child with a couple of children, because she has one child who has one relationship with the mother, and the mother has that same, theoretically, that same dynamic with another child. So you suddenly have a bunch of children, each of them solo in their connection with a mother who's theoretically multiple. Seems like it.
Yeah, and especially if this first child, after 1 year, next child, and the next child, it's not to handle. You can see it in very often when you ask somebody in what position as a child you have been. I was the second child after 1 year of my elder sister. You immediately know something could not happen, because the mother was not prepared is not open enough to let this first child go and to exclusively engage with the second child. It's from nature. So there are some cultures, the indigenous cultures, that have a birth rate from 4 years, in between 4 years. Having a child, 4 years, and then having the next child. And this seems, in a way, manageable for the women, that they say no, oh, this child now can live on its own, and then let's have another child. And also by breastfeeding. Yeah? Breastfeeding prevents becoming pregnant so quickly, and continuous breastfeeding, and then stopping breastfeeding, and then the organism is prepared for the next child. But having like this cultural idea, very quickly having the 2 children you want to have, to finish having children, it's against, you could say, it's against nature, in a way. It's an idea. It's a concept.
Do you sort of combine gender roles and sexuality? Stay-at-home dads are not less masculine than they were.
What?
Stay-at-home dads are not less masculine than they were before they started to stay at home.
I do not get the question.
When the man, the father, cares for the children and the woman works, and so it's just about roles, gender roles.
What
it's not much to do with sexuality per se.
What I observed in these cases, I know some cases where the women immediately went to work again and left the children with the husband, that these women couldn't stand, because of their own sexual traumatization, couldn't stand the children, couldn't stand body contact, couldn't deal with the intimate contact, and they were very happy if they found a partner that was more drawn towards dealing with baby, having body contact with the baby. So they arranged in a way like this. But if a mother is fleeing away from being a mother, be sure there's some severe trauma behind. It's not done by gender roles. It's not done by identifications. There's something deeper behind that. That's my observation.
Of course, that puts you in direct conflict with so much of the politics of the women's movement and everything else now.
Of course, identity theories is not much compatible with the surviving strategies we have in our societies. Although this idea, giving a 6-month-old baby in a kindergarten and in a crash and for the whole day, it's supported. It's financed by taxes. Yeah? But it's a survival strategy. It's a cultural surviving strategy. Nothing else. Because a healthy mother wants to stay with the child, wants to care for the child. If a mother is in her healthy state, she wants to have a contact with the baby. It's a pleasure for her also. It's not just a burden. She likes it. For a while, for some years. Until she sees the baby doesn't need me so much. Yeah. Okay. Well, then maybe I continue with the trauma of sexuality. And the trauma of sexuality is part, as you meanwhile know, and I told you already, part of the concept of the trauma biography that starts with the trauma of identity and then inevitably lands in the trauma of love, and from that, more or less with regular, as if it is a rule, ends up in the trauma of sexuality. And in one or other way, every one of us who is the victim of a trauma and is traumatized, we all in our one or other way, we become perpetrator. We become, in a way, perpetrators ourselves. One example we have already discussed during this workshop is the abortion, the widespread thing of abortion. Yeah, and so before I say something about the trauma of sexuality, I just mention a little bit about trauma of love. Love, in a way, I define as a desire to be loved and a desire to love, both. I want to receive love, I want to get love, and the same, I want to show my love, I give my love. Yeah? And the love starts with the baby, I would say. No? New love comes into existence with every new baby. Every new baby is a new start for love in human beings. Even if the mother has lost her capacity to love or to behave in a healthy way in loving, with the baby a new chance comes. Every baby is a new chance for new love. Because the baby unconditionally loves the mother, unconditionally wants to have the contact, wants to give mother love, wants to be good for the mother in order to have a good mother. It's vice versa. It's something that is necessary for the baby, and so it has both. The baby can give love and the baby can receive love. And the trauma of love means that a child has to split off its own I and want in order to stay in a contact with his or her, and now I have to include, when I send it out to you, traumatized mother. Because if the mother is not traumatized, the baby doesn't have any difficulty. The baby does not have to split, and the mother is not traumatized. Because the healthy mother is okay with the baby as it is. And there are some characteristics of the trauma of love we should know. We should know if we work with others and we do this type of work, that we know how this trauma of love shows in the surviving strategies. That we can see what is healthy love and what is surviving strategy love. And there are 6 of them. The first one is that you're lifelong struggling with the parents to get their love. It never ends. It doesn't end. Normally it should end when you are 3 or 4. The parents are not so much important any longer. Your friends are more important, and so on and so on. A significant sign of traumatization of love is that lifelong you are expecting your mother to see you, to love you, to give you her love that you wanted to have as a child. The second thing is the idealization of mother and father. That you are not allowed, and you can't say, this mother or father is traumatizing me. It's a perpetrator. Oh no, it's not possible. It's a sin. You go to hell if you say this. Every religion will tell you, go to hell if you say you have not good parents. If you're not thankful, if you're not acknowledging what they have done to you, then you will go to hell minimum after death, if not during life. And so this we have as a widespread idealization also not only in individuals but in societies, in psychotherapies also. You are told your mothers and your father are good enough. There's nothing wrong with them. Maybe they're giving you not so much as you have needed, but never telling you that your mother or your father has traumatized you. No. It's out of any way of thinking about like this. Yeah, then the other thing is identifying with the survival strategies of the parents. For example, be brave, don't complain, don't cry, be happy, show that you are a good student, you are a good pupil, you can earn a lot of money by being busy enough. So this is how you may adapt to the survival strategies of your parents. Don't come to me, don't want some body contact from me, and then you do it. To be obedient. The fourth thing is that this constant effort to rescue your parents. What can I do? What can I do to make them happy? What can I do more that they are more happy, less depressed as they are? What is possible for me to do? Yeah. The fifth thing is that because you don't get a direct access to the healthy emotions of the parents, then you more going deeper and deeper in their psyche and have then the contact with the trauma feelings of them. It also can happen unconsciously during the birth process. We have discussed it. Yeah? You get, or pain, yeah? You connect. Because there's nothing else you can connect with your mother, then you connect with your baby. Then chronic pain can be the consequence of being merged with the pain of the mother. And if this is solved, the chronic pain is gone. And this can also happen that if you are raised up by your grandmother, you also can merge with the trauma feelings of your grandmother or the grandfather. And what's also significant for the trauma of love, the surviving strategy for trauma of love, that you deny your own trauma. Maybe my parents have difficulties, maybe my parents are traumatized, maybe sometimes some person think like this, but not me. I'm the healthy one. I'm the one that can tolerate everything, that can deal with it, that fix everything. I'm healthy. They maybe are ill or need some support. Not me. So these are what I found out during many years of work, the 6 most significant surviving strategies in the trauma of love. That means love illusions. All love illusions. Not real love, but love illusions that are here. Yeah, so the sexual trauma has huge consequences. Yeah? The sexual traumatization produces a profound confusion in the feeling of a child. And the sexual trauma is a consequence of a trauma of love and trauma of identity. So it's not... I do not see it that it's outstanding alone. It's always combined, connected with trauma of identity and trauma of love. So there are different types of sexual trauma. There's the sexual traumatization during childhood in different degrees. There's incest, that means sexual intercourse with relatives. There's rape inside or outside of partnership. There's rape as a strategy of soldiers in war times. There's pornography. There's prostitution. And there's some of the worst form of sexual traumatization, this ritual sexual sadism. That's what I learned about working with clients. All forms of sexual trauma showed up. Yeah, and the most severe form of sexual trauma that produces the most profound confusion is this sexual traumatization within a family. This is the worst thing, and it's most difficult to deal with, and the most difficult to step out of it. And it's often, what I've written down here, is often already since generation it happens. Sexual traumatization within the family, since generation. It happens from grandmother, mother, daughter, granddaughter. It goes on. If it is not stopped, it goes on. If it's not seen, it goes on. It is a perpetrator-victim dynamic within a family, an ongoing perpetrator-victim dynamic. And in some publications, I call this bonding system trauma, because it's a bonding system. Family is a bonding system, a system where bonding relationships. And so the traumatized mothers and fathers, that should be the main resource for a healthy development of the children, put them under permanently stress if they are perpetrator. This is a bonding figure. The perpetrator is a bonding figure for the child, and it turns out that this bonding figure is the perpetrator. And this is absolutely confusing for the child, because this is the hugest contradiction that can happen. You need this person as somebody who gives you support for your life. At the same time, this person is the perpetrator. Oh, it's such a super-GAU. And so that means you can't behave correctly. Whatever you do is wrong. If you say something is wrong, if you don't say something is also wrong. That means as long as you stay in such a system, you can't develop a healthy identity. It's not possible. As long as we stay in the perpetrator-victim system, a family, you can't become really healthy. It's not possible. Within the system, you have to split. Within the system, you have either be in victim attitudes or in perpetrator attitudes. That is the options you have. And some aspects of the bonding aspects of sexual traumatization is that there is a betrayal of love and confidence the child shows towards the perpetrator. It confounds love and aggression. It destroys the boundaries between the older and the younger generation. It's twisting responsibility, because very often the perpetrator blames you and you're responsible. It's up to you how you behave. It's a loss of trust in parents, siblings, relatives, teachers, and also later on in psychologists. If a child goes to a psychologist and this psychologist doesn't see what's going on and doesn't see the sexual perpetration in their child, of course, as a child you can't trust the psychologist. How could you? And there are some aspects of shock trauma in the sexual traumatization that immediately affects the body. It is immediately has to do with freezing, numbing, behaving like that if you're sexually hurt. You try to leave the body, observing you from outside, and to give up the I and the own will. This is what the ultimate consequence has to be. That sexual traumatization again forces you to disconnect from your I and disconnect from your want. This is the reason why it's after sexual trauma it's so difficult to regain your I again, you regain your want again. And so there are many symptoms of sexual traumatization, nightmares and sleeping problems, various anxieties, eating disorders, learning difficulties, extreme clinging to other persons, extreme retreat, you don't want to deal with anyone any longer, depression, lack of feelings, physical illnesses, the long list, a very long list, disliking your own body, disgusting sexuality, shamelessness, self-harm behavior, promiscuity, prostitution, masochism, sadism, drug abuse, hostility, criminality, confusion and madness, schizophrenia, psychosis. So all sorts of severe problems we see in individuals and see in society. I have as example this self-harming behavior as a consequence of sexual trauma. This one thing is to overcome the numbness, because the body becomes numb and then you don't feel anything, then to try to feel something again, or to resolve the inner pressure, because there's so tenseness in the body that if you cut yourself, then maybe for some moments you feel some relief if the blood drops out. Another thing is to make yourself unattractive. It's the same true for those who have eating disorders and they grow fat and develop a very big body in order to become unattractive for the perpetrator. It's a non-verbal cry for help. It's a reinscenation of the experience of violence, and is somehow you act out the perpetrator interject by doing this self-harming. You are same perpetrator and victim at the same moment. Yeah. And this also, what I saw, it's expressing the hate against your own weakness. Because as a victim, in your victim attitudes, you always want to be strong. You don't want to be a victim. And so you hate yourself being a victim. Yeah, another example is this eating disorders, anorexia. It is what I observed. It was the attempt to control one's body reaction, because during the sexual act there was also feeling of desire and lust, and then they feel guilty and they want to control the body, that the body should not ever react again with lust and desire. Though it's good to have no body if the body is gone completely. And the bulimia I observed, this has to do with oral sexual abuse, vomiting out the penis and the swallowed sperms, and the obesity, making one's body unattractive for the perpetrator. So, the sexual trauma is very often reinscenating unconsciously by our surviving parts. So, for example, a prostitute, and I never heard about prostitutes that were not sexually traumatized in childhood, yeah? But prostitution is a constant reinscenation of the childhood trauma, the sexual trauma in childhood. Yeah, in a way, the surviving strategy hoped to free oneself from intolerable inner states and to gain control over the perpetrators. You attract the man, now you think, now I get control over them. Now, no, not longer as I was a child, but now I can control them. So that it's this weird thing about those persons that maybe are diagnosed borderline or so. They behave very attractive. They have skirts, very good. The breast is very open, and they attract man. Then, in order to now, I can show that I have control of them. But very often they end up in the next aggressive act of sexuality. So we have, if we look at it on the perspective of inner parts, we have quite a lot of inner parts in a sexual traumatized child. They are split of traumatized parts that are full of panic, full of shame, full of disgust. There are parts that hate the perpetrators. There are parts that do not trust anybody any longer. There are parts, on the other hand, with love illusions towards the perpetrators. There are parts that want to satisfy the perpetrator sexually. They're still there. There are parts that disgust their own helplessness, we talked about before. There are parts that feel guilty. There are parts that feel shame for the perpetrator. I feel shame for my father that he has done that, or my grandfather. And they're still available. That is the good message. There are still available healthy parts. But you see what huge confusion is created within a child that is sexually traumatized. Huge contradictions, huge opposites that you can't handle. Sometimes this part shows up, sometimes this part shows up, and yeah, as long as there is no I that manages all, you are lost. And borderline, for example, the borderline personality disorder, the diagnosis is very, in this person you can see it, this confusion. You can see this high up and downs of behavior and up and downs of moods, and very clearly. And behind there is the sexual trauma, based on trauma of love and based on trauma of identity. So the dynamic of sexual trauma is one of the main reasons for so-called mental diseases like borderline, schizophrenia, psychosis, or addiction. Yeah? If you work in psychiatry, be sure that those you diagnose like this are all sexually traumatized. There are some empirical studies also. Normally, psychiatrists are not interested in the trauma background, but there are some studies, and they clearly show that in the background of those diagnoses, there's always sexual trauma included. Yeah, and what's also worse is that the victim of sexual trauma can easily become the perpetrators in the next generation. So there's a vicious circle for sexual trauma, that sexually traumatized girls become mothers that traumatize their own children emotionally and sexually. And the girls of sexually traumatized mothers have a high risk to become sexually traumatized. And sons of traumatized mothers become emotionally confused and are in a high risk to become sexually traumatized by their mothers. Now they, in a way, sense something, the reaction of their mother towards me, something seems to be wrong with me, because they do not know that the mothers have been sexually traumatized and now react to every male person with disgust. And so sons are in a high risk to become later on perpetrators in sexuality. I had some clients that then went to prostitutes, that went to practices like sadomasochism, because of their mothers being so sexually traumatized and being so rejecting their body contact with them. Yeah, and silencing, denying, and lying are necessarily part of every sexual trauma. The truth can be told, you have to be silent, nobody should know. It happens beyond the eyes of the public, and if the public notices, then the public closes the eye. This is something I go further. It's too specific. What is important for us as therapists is to know if we are sexually traumatized or not. It's very important for us, because who is not able to realize their own sexual trauma is not able to realize the sexual trauma in others. Those therapists that haven't dealt with their own sexual biography do not know what happened there. How can they be helpful for those who come to them and have the issue of a sexual traumatization? There is a risk of blindness and overcompensation to see sexual abuse nowhere and anywhere. So if you do not see your own sexual trauma, then you are maybe over alert towards, oh, my daughter there could be sexual trauma in the contact with my daughter and my divorced husband. I have some clients, as long as they do not have the security of their own sexual traumatization, they don't see it, or they see too much, even it's not happening. Yeah, and there's problems, of course, to looking for therapeutical support. That if you know there's something, of course, there's the risk that it comes up. So it's better not to go to see the therapist than it could not. The risk is not there that it could show up. And so there's very often the loyalty towards the perpetrator is still very high, because it is a bonding figure for you, and you think you need this person and you love this person, and and it seems it's very difficult to really accept being made a victim of sexual traumatization, of awful things that happen. It can be, it can't be. It can't be. Yeah? Sometimes it's so awful, it's so cruel that it's very difficult to accept that this happened to us and this happened to you. And the feelings of shame are so massive. So in every work we deal with sexual trauma, be sure this is a shame issue. It's very shameful for the person, and so we have to deal very properly and very carefully if we have this issue in the constellations. We have to be very careful, not to put blame on the person, more blame, more shame on the person, because it's enough shame already there. Yeah. It could be too much. Yeah, and also the closeness with a therapist could produce panic and anxieties, so it's better to keep the distance. And there's also a fear to become dependent again from a loved person, the therapist. So it's better to stay away and not to open up too much. So what are the principles of identity therapy regarding now the sexual trauma? One thing is that the client can combine the symptoms of the sexual trauma, because there are so many symptoms of a sexual trauma that you now understand that this is a consequence. The symptom is a consequence of the sexual trauma. And first, we have to focus on the trauma of identity, because you can't solve the issues of a trauma of sexuality as long as there is not looked at the trauma of identity, as long as this I, the healthy I, is split off and you have no access to it. The same with the will, that the will develops, that you see you have a healthy will, and you can make use of your healthy will. And then making you aware of the trauma of love, and the trauma of love being the reason why you protect the perpetrators, why you protect, for example, abusive parents, not protecting the mother, protecting the father, protecting the grandfather, protecting the brother, because of your bonding needs. Yeah, and also something that can be shown in such a therapy, that you become aware that partnerships and relations with one's own children can be surviving strategies to avoid the realization of own trauma. Whenever there is an intention about relation, then it can show behind this the avoidance, to try to avoid to look at your own trauma. Yeah, and so we have to help others. We have to be helped ourselves to think the unthinkable, to realize the unthinkable, to realize that the parents, grandparents, or other family members are perpetrators of sexual trauma. And to help to speak it out loud, to speak it out in a group, not to silence anymore, not to be silenced anymore, and to be self-conscious enough to say, yes, that is my truth. And even in my family, whoever, somebody will say, you are a liar, it's not true. It's my truth, and I speak it loud out in a community. And then also it's important thing is to clear responsibility, because children feel guilty, children feel responsible what happened in the sexual trauma, and that it becomes clear, no, it was not your responsibility. Even your desire, your longing for body contact was so huge, so you accepted the body contact and you were seeking the body contact. Somehow you went to the perpetrator in order to get body contact, but it's not your fault, it's not your guilt. You were a child that needed body contact. You were a child that needed affection. And it's not your guilt if then somebody abused your desire for sexual trauma. So it means we see the needs for children for closeness, love, and body contact as normal. There's nothing wrong in that. We help to remember, understand the perpetrator parts within the victim is so good in constellation that it's so easily possible to identify that there's a perpetrator within me. Until now, I believe that's me, but then I see, no, that's not me, it's another person. Yeah, and helping in the end, helping up to open up again for good feelings. It's not forever impossible to enjoy sexuality if you have the sexual trauma. It's important to see this, to realize this, and to create this hope and open the way towards healthy sexuality in our trauma therapy. Thank you. So, if there are comments or questions, you're welcome.
Franz, I have a few questions. So the first question I have is about the definition of sexual trauma, because it sounds to me like the term can, it's a broad term. It can involve a number of situations, actions, and I would like you to perhaps talk a little bit more in detail about what you mean by sexual trauma. It might be like an obvious question, but it's not as obvious when I think about it.
Yeah. Sexual trauma means that this, what I talked about before, sexuality, is put under trauma conditions. Yeah? That is, you are made an object, you are forced to do something, you are confronted with pain, intolerable shame, intolerable feelings of rage, all those sorts of situations that brings you in a situation where you can't deal with your body, you can't deal with your emotions, you can't deal with your thinking. Yeah? It's too much. And then you have to split it off. And it's too much. It's too much if a child is touched inappropriately by another person, and the child can't deal with it.
So you can, I guess my question is goes more in terms of, it's not only penetration, for example, it's about a number of situations that involve inappropriate contact with someone in a way that is not voluntary or...
Yes, can also be that somebody is masturbating in front of you, and you can't avoid it, to be a witness, and this person doesn't allow you to run away or so.
Now, because you talk about...
And this images stays in you. That is what for children, for example, if they see it and it stays with them and they can't disconnect from it. Yeah?
The other questions I have are more related to one, self-harm, and second, like the terminology, the psychiatric terminology of schizophrenia, psychosis, and eating disorders. So are you saying that those, let's say, diagnoses are always related to a history of sexual trauma, and is self-harm always related to sexual trauma, or is there any other cause of self-harm?
The sexual trauma is a consequence of trauma of identity, not being wanted. The consequence of the trauma of love, not being loved, and the consequence of not being protected. That the sexual trauma is on top of something. So the more severe the symptoms become, the more you have this step done, these steps in your trauma biography. That is additionally to the trauma of love, additionally not being protected, there's perpetration against you, and then you become a perpetrator against yourself. And you become victim and perpetrators inside yourself without being able to get it clear what side is me and what side is not me.
So does that mean that in some cases, or for some people, you don't expect to find sexual trauma, but you could find a trauma of identity and or trauma of love without getting or reaching to the point of having sexual trauma?
If there's something like huge drug abuse, self-harm, all these eating disorders, all this self-destructive behavior, be sure there was perpetrated, there was massive perpetration. And in 99.9% also perpetration again in a sexual way. So be sure that this is the case. Yeah. Maybe there is some exception from the rule, but I didn't see it until now. Yeah. But of course, scientifically I would say everything is possible, so also the exception is possible. But there is some very strong law that this, if this is how the persons behave, is a reinstination of the drama, then you see in the reinstination the huge amount of perpetration against them, and this includes, in most of the cases, also sexual perpetration. Being beaten and being neglected and being not protected from sexual trauma. Okay. You're welcome. Yeah, and let me say something. This artificial diagnosis like schizophrenia, psychosis, borderline, blah, 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 is a protection for the perpetrators. They serve, this in psychiatry I would say, this diagnosis serves to protect the perpetrators and to blame the victim. To blame the victim, you are borderline, you are schizophrenic, something's wrong with you and not something is been done to you. You're the victim. So the whole psychiatric diagnosis system is a protection shield for the perpetrators. That's how I see it. Oh, for example, anorexia, yeah? What they say, oh, this child, it doesn't want to eat, it has ideals of being slim and not. What a bullshit. What a bullshit. How it is discussed in the magazine, in the newspapers. Oh my God. I could really get upset when I see this. Yeah. Well, you nod your head. You agree. Okay, so let's finish the lecture. Yes, yes, yeah.
So when you, in your anorexic example there, it's not necessarily the case that it's binary in that one generation. Would that be correct?
Something happened to this person.
It can be transgenerational as well as...
It includes, of course, that the mother is already sexually traumatized, but it includes the harm that's done against this body. Otherwise you don't do it. You don't do this huge harm against your body if nobody has done harm against your body. You won't do it. It's not only a transference of the trauma of mother towards you. No. I never saw it like this. This idea of, it's only transferred, is one of the latest escape mechanisms to avoid the realization of an own sexual trauma. That's what I observe. That I observe very often.
But then, how you deal with this, I'm just make up an example, like in that person, he or she couldn't recall of any abuse, but he or she definitely know that his or her parents or grand sexually abused. So for this person will be very confused, whether when he or she childhood was really sexual abuse or not. If in the constellation you see it but you still don't remember it, and the concept is always your body remember. But in here, that person was quite sure nothing happened, but try to being persuaded from what he sees. But what he or she sees can be the past generation, or maybe I'm kind of confused sometimes because I see a lot of cases like that.
Yeah, and this is the reason why first we have to handle and deal with the trauma of identity. Because if there is no I, no want, you can't contribute these emotions and what comes up in your body towards you or the other person. You need first the focus in yourself, and then you can see this feeling belongs to me and this not. And we need the I as the focus to solve these questions. Otherwise it's not possible. And the trauma of identity itself means I put away my I. Yeah? And the trauma of sexuality means I even put away my surviving I. it could not happen. What I experienced, it could not happen to me. It's impossible. Yeah? So it's the last refugees, they say, maybe something happened, but it didn't happen to me. Because I gave up the contact with myself in this situation. Withdraw myself from the situation, left my body alone. My body then, something happened to my body, but it didn't happen to me. And this, of course, it takes time. It takes time. To deal with sexual traumatization is nothing that you can do in one step and immediately. It needs preparation, it needs some more attempts, it can show up more often in your work, and then it's not enough to get it clear. Then you work more on your identity trauma, and the more that you work on that, the clearer it can also become what type of sexual trauma, if there's a sexual trauma. So big patient with you on this. Don't put yourself under pressure.
One question more is to distinguish between trauma of identity and trauma of sexual trauma. So if, let's say in some culture that see woman is useless, so as a female grow up, basically just, I wouldn't say worthless, but I think in this world is trying to be more successful than male. So it's kind of, to me, it's in between, sexual trauma and trauma of identity. So what you classify this?
No, trauma of identity, very clear. If somebody tells you, you are, as you are, nothing, not worth anything, or because you are female, it's craziness. It forces you. If this person has power over you, has influence on you, it forces you to split off from your original knowing, I'm okay, I'm right. And then you go into survival strategies and end up in the trauma of love. That is how it goes. It's not sexual trauma in this way, in this meaning.
Okay. Can I ask something? So I hear you saying that to be able to deal with the sexual trauma, you need to have a healthy eye, or to have to deal first with your trauma of identity. So does that mean that once you have resolved that, in order for you to resolve your sexual trauma, do you need to remember what happened to you? Or can it be resolved without the memory of the events?
Yeah, what is memory? Memory, for example, if it happens during the night, there's no light on. Maybe you only smell the perpetrator, you only feel his hands, and you have no pictures. Yeah? And also you can close your eyes when you don't have pictures. You just have body sensations. Yeah? So what is memory? Yeah? So it's important, the memory, the imprint of the sexual trauma, to remember, this is a symptom of the imprint. Yeah? I want to scratch all the time myself, and because you want to get rid of the imprint of the perpetrator that was in body contact with you. That is important to remember, and in order to separate, this is the body of the perpetrator, this is my body. So see, it's important for a purpose. The memory is important for the purpose to deal with the symptoms. So it's not useful alone, say in general, I was, because you have so many symptoms out of this. So in order to get free from the symptoms, you have to remember specifically. If you have stomach problems or problems with inflammation in your mouth, and it was because of oral sexual trauma, then it is necessary to remember that in order to get rid of this inflammation and this nausea or something like this. Yeah? It is specific. This trauma of sexuality is a specific trauma, and so you have to remember it specifically. Bill.
Franz, just to follow up with that a little, and just statistically, what I see come through my group is probably a mixture. It's 80% women, 20% men. I would say more than half of women have had some form of sexual abuse. So it's a topic that always comes up. But what you're just describing, the trauma of sexuality, the person actually has to get to the point of being able to say, this happened to me, and a statement of intention usually comes out, I want to understand why my father had sex with me, something like that. And that brings it out, and that it can be claimed at that point, but that's where the work begins then to go back to the trauma of identity and trauma of love at that point.
Yeah, yeah. And Bill, what I try to avoid is the term abuse, sexual abuse, because this doesn't name something like it is. It's a trauma. It forces you to split. Yeah, and even in societies where they are aware of what happened to children, and as long as they don't call it trauma, they don't miss the point. They do miss the point, and they do not going into detail and deepness. What's the trauma behind, and so on.
So it's a good point. It's almost always called abuse.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's avoiding strategy. Even it's obvious something that is traumatizing, so obvious traumatizing, in our society they still don't use the word trauma. And so I'm trying to be a role model and always talk about sexual trauma. Yeah. This was also in our new book. I changed it from the different authors in the book, and told them, let us talk from now on about sexual trauma and not sexual abuse. Well, coffee break, huh? Yeah, and sun cake. Okay, yes.